Good
All right.
morning.
Good morning. And it is Sunday. Crazy. July 9th. Super excited to have you here. Thank you so much. A combination of sharing with you some of my materials from where I'm taking my metaphysics degree and uh, your invisible power, and talking about basically the same thing, but using completely different words. And I thought that was interesting as when I, randomly picked up the book this morning and I felt compelled to go check my emails this morning, which was interesting because that's not usually a task I do on Sunday. But I don't question as often. I won't say I don't question, but I don't question as often anymore. And so as I opened up my email this morning, this came through from the university that I'm taking my course from. And it says, the awakened soul is no more immune to life's difficulties than the unawakened soul. In fact, in many cases, the awakened souls have more to contend with, simply because they attempt to do so much more in their lives. On the other hand, the unawakened souls who are content merely to sit and do as little as possible attempt to slide through life, doing only which is either expected of them or forced upon them. For those souls who do attempt to do more and be more, not in just in a worldly sense, but also regarding being a whole and complete person, their real need is to find a greater source of identity or selfhood within themselves. Through the ages, mystics, sages, and seers have come to know their true selves. It has lifted their lives from frustration and lack of hope to optimism and success in dealing with life's major concerns. Wherever a person feels unable to deal with something in life, it is a false identity that is speaking within the mind. This false identity is composite, or reflection of an unawakened and neurotic society. It reflects the acceptance of limitation or the avoidance of striving for excellence in one's life. Such a false sense of identity associates you with the impotency of mass consciousness that does not excel. On the other hand, your true self can do whatever needs to be done in your life. For your true self is an individualized manifestation of the eternal, infinite, all-knowing, all-creative, all-loving presence of God at the center of your mind. Simply said, your true self is an individualized manifestation of God. What a revelation and discovery that is, one that can make a difference in what you can accomplish in your life. The true self that is at the point of consciousness in your mind, where your individual soul and God's spirit and mind emerge. For an authentic Christian mystic, that place in the mind would be known as Christ consciousness. So I thought that was so interesting that, they talk about, the connection to Christ consciousness, that, I've said the words that I've used is we're a fractal energy of God or divine, whichever word feels easier for you to accept. And what I love, Sherry's not that individualized expression. I love that too. What I really love about this particular passage is the recognition that our true self, right? When we identify with our true self, anything and everything is possible. When we identify with our limiting self, it will feel, circumstances will feel overwhelming. I would say that if I'm in my true self form, I will respond to different things. I'll take inspired action. When I'm identifying with my false self, then I would say that I react and I take action based out of more fear, doubt, and worry. And I'm assuming, and it would be an assumption, that everyone, when that accesses their true divine nature, it will feel different than if we're accessing our false self, right? And so what happens then is that when you're feeling limited, you can remind yourself that that's your false self is feeling limited, that you have access to, excuse me, oh, there's some truth because my throat's getting all scratchy. You have access to your divine self at any time. And you don't have to go look for, like, you don't have to find it. It's not hidden, right? It's just, I think it's just an awareness, like, oh, this is interesting. I'm in worry, doubt, or fear. That's the false self, right? My true self, a fractal energy of divine source energy, right? Or in this particular case, your true self is an individualized manifestation of the infinite, all-knowing, all-creative, all-loving presence of God at the center of your mind, right? Your true self is an individualized manifestation of God. When we do that, we can just immediately, this is how we use our conscious thoughts, our intelligence. We move into, oh, then I'm making a decision. I'm making a choice to identify with false self. So I will make a decision, a choice to identify with my true self. And so in metaphysics, what they talk about is the way to access more easily your divine self is through a daily practice of meditation. I personally don't believe that there's a right way or wrong way to meditate. I think, and I think one of the challenges we have with meditation is we believe that we're meant to just sit and like not have any thoughts. And so I personally have not had that experience. And in fact, my my true divine self, the fractal energy of God, Christ consciousness, speaks to me during meditation. And so that's why I don't think we're to be void of thought. But I certainly can tell when it's my false self. My false self is like, oh, make sure you remember to, right, throw this in the laundry. Oh, don't forget to, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then when I hear those words, don't forget, I go, okay, remember, if you use the words don't forget, your mind only hears the word forget because your mind can't process don't. So that's kind of the conversation I can have in meditation. And then I will just like, oh yeah, right, let it go. So I spend, time in my meditation, and it will depend on time of day, time of month, what's happening with the moon. So sometimes my false self is really loud, and sometimes my false self is quieter. But either way, what is being shared, and not just through metaphysics of the importance of meditation, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this is an important part of us tapping into our true self, our Christ conscious self. So, and what their explanation here, and again, this is from my materials from my course. A daily practice of meditation provides you with inner access to Christ consciousness, where your soul merges with God consciousness. And as a result of that merger, the more surface human levels of your mind are opened and exposed to the many attributes of God, mind, and spirit, which provides you with what is necessary to do what needs to be done. Remember, we're a triune being. So we need, right, access to the physical body. If this merger were to be totally experienced in meditation, it would be what mystics described as a mystical union with God. During such an experience, all sense of personal selfhood disappears, and all that exists is one infinite field of light in its entirety. The Christ consciousness of your true self can provide you with whatever makes it possible for you to say, my true self can. And so, I love that, even that saying, my true self can. So, when we're feeling like we can't do something, we can go, oh yeah, right, my false self may feel that she can't, but my true self can. If this is a desire that's, it's a burning desire, a yearning, right, my true self can, right? And so then just with that simple statement, for me personally, brings a lot of serenity, a lot of peace, right? My true self can. My false self wants to know how right away. My false self wants the plan. My true self as faith, well, because there is a plan and it's being unfolded as each decision I make. So I say yes. So as each time you say yes to the decision, the plan unfolds. The plan cannot unfold until you say yes and take that first step. That would be like the leap of faith. I think that's where that comes from. And so your invisible power, as I said, two separate authors, two separate readings, two separate ways of expressing something that is similar or the same. So here we go. When you first begin to visualize seriously, you may feel that someone else may be forming the same picture you are, and that naturally would not suit your purpose. Do not give yourself any concern about this. Simply try to realize that your picture is an orderly exercise of the universal creative power. Endeavor to bear in mind that your mental picture is universal mind, specifically exercising its inherent powers of initiative and selection. God, or universal mind, made man for the special purpose of differentiating himself, let's set capital H, himself through him. Okay. Everything there is came into existence in this same way, by this same law of self-differentiating and for the same purpose, pardon me. First came the idea, the mental picture, which is the thing in itself. It is in the nature of originating substance to solidify under directivity rather than activity. So it took me a while to what the hell does that mean? But basically, when we use our mental picture and we're communicating with universal mind, we're communicating with the fractal energy of God, we're communicating with Christ consciousness, we're communicating with this individualized manifestation of God, all meaning the same thing, just different words. We then take action because we're being directed. We're directed by inspired action, and we take the action, but it's not activity. What Genevieve is saying, it's not the activity, but it's because we're directing. We're directing it, right? So it is the nature of originating substance to solidify under directivity rather than activity. So we're directing the mental picture. We're thinking about the mental picture. We have this connection to universal mind, right? We have this connection to, Christ consciousness, divine, fractal energy of divine source. Here, the university is saying, Dr. Paul, I think, individualized manifestation of God. So we have this mental picture. We direct the mental picture. So it's not through the activity, it's through the direction of the mental picture. We do take inspired action, and inspired action is important, but it all manifests. We take it from formless substance into form with this mental picture and then attaching the emotion to it. It's like, what would I be, if this thing happens? This is kind of how I look at it. When this, and I said if, so let me delete that. delete. When this thing happens, how will I feel? What would be the first thing that I would do, right? So I would for me personally, attach some sort of activity around it. And so that I'm bringing emotion into it, right? And so I'm bringing emotion into it, and then I take inspired action. For me, one of the benefits of meditation is my inspired action comes through when I'm connecting to Christ consciousness through meditation. So inspired action comes to me when I've quieted my false self, my false mind, when I've quieted the personality, when I've quieted the ego, right? The I. When she's quiet, I have this clearer connection to Christ consciousness, which is why meditation, and it could be meditation, it could be walk in the forest, it could be yoga. I mean, everyone will have their way of quieting their mind. sometimes what can happen is we can get the challenge. Let me rephrase that. Not sometimes. Thank you. The challenge with our electronic devices is that we, when we are not on our electronic devices, right now society is experiencing the racing mind, right? That this restlessness that one should be, quote unquote, doing something. So then we go to the electronic devices to give us this false sense that we're doing something, right? Because our brain is being active. If we take a moment though, and we don't turn on the electronic devices, and we just sit with the racing mind, eventually the racing mind quiets itself. And it can do that through meditation or through breath work or journaling or whatever, right? And the racing mind then can quiet. Then we can access this true divine essence of who we are. So your picture is this same divine substance in its original state, taking form through the individualized center of divine operation in your mind. And there's no power to prevent this combination of spiritual substance from becoming physical form. It is the nature of spirit to complete its work, and an idea is not complete until it's made for itself a vehicle. Nothing can prevent your picture from coming into concrete form except the same power which gave it birth, which is you. Right? And such a so very powerful, and it's simple, not easy necessarily, but the simplicity of it. And so I think sometimes what can happen is, because at least for me, I'll let me not conjecture or project, but share. For years, I felt like everyone else could do this thing except for me. And I had a really difficult time manifesting in the way that others manifested. And, had a lot of years of shame and guilt, and lots of confusion because I didn't understand. And it would be like, it seemed so simple, but it felt like it was just so far out of reach. And as I started to unpack all the limiting beliefs that told me all of the ways that that wasn't going to happen, right? Then, and I started to unpack those, and I started to see the lies, right? And started to see the false identity. And as I became aware of, I might have known, and so for me it's the universal laws. I might have known about the universal laws. I might have read the universal laws, but I really wasn't applying them to my life. I wasn't integrating, the universal laws into my life. And so that when I decided to do that, when I decided it wasn't just about knowing that there's a law called the law of attraction, thoughts become things, right? It was so much deeper than that. And that my role, like one of my purposes in life, was to figure out how to integrate those so that I could share that message with people. And then it became even deeper, that to integrate all of everything that comes to me is now, am I meant to integrate that to share with people? And I was sharing that with you because I, certainly at different times in my journey, there was times of hopelessness that I had. And I just kept on being reminded that, that my journey was my very own, and to not compare it to other people. And B, I do manifest differently. And, and again, when, I discovered human design, it was 2 or 3 years ago now, that to me was life altering, because it was like, oh, I am, this energy type called a reflector, and there's 1% of me. And that would, for me, it was just this deep sigh of, okay, I'm not totally fucked up. Right. And so I am different, and I process things different. And I had an explanation, because I had been on a trek. I had been in a search. And I believe that, human design came to me because I really I had some very clear questions that I was asking divine to answer for me. So, two of the biggest takeaways to kind of revisit. English, please. Words. The first one is, don't discount the power of your visualization, the power of imagination. And add emotion to it, right? It's important we emote, right? That's the first one. And the second one is, whenever we're not feeling stellar, we're identifying, check in. Thank you. Check in if you're identifying with your false self and not your true fractal source, energy self. Because it's that connection to false self that will have us in our conditioning, right? In comparison, in our limiting beliefs, where when we're in our true self, when we're identified with our true self, this Christ consciousness self, this fractal of divine energy, right? This individualized, right? We are an individualized manifestation of God. We can tap back into that. And that will really bring you what I see is an image, right, of hands coming together. And it's like, okay, now I'm centered. And now I'm centered. And then we can have grace for the false self, right? Grace for that. So I think that's it. Hang on, let me just check in if there's anything else I meant to share while I have a sip of my mushroom coffee. Nope. That's it. But I will stop the recording, and if anyone has any questions, we can do that.